Get straight into it. South Africa's booming online gambling sector could face a major change. National Treasury proposes a 20% tax on gross gambling revenue. The move aims to slow growth, tackle problem gambling, and address social harms linked to online betting. Christopher Axelson, Deputy Director General for Tax and Financial Sector Policy, joining us now to explain this proposal perhaps a little bit further. Christopher, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it, because I think there's so much clarity that would be needed on this one. It's a growing phenomenon, if it hasn't grown to full extent already around the world and certainly here in South Africa. But as National Treasury, is the aim of this one to make it feel like a sin tax? Or is it because it is now generating the kind of revenue that would ultimately help the government? Good morning.
Yeah. Morning, and thanks for having me. No, I think the way we look at this is it's closer to a sin tax. The mechanism isn't quite the same. We're not going to tax it the same way we tax alcohol or tobacco. We tax it on per drink or per cigarette. So we are going to tax the companies and the revenue that they generate. But we look at it like a sin tax. We said that in the discussion paper, if there's a reduction in online gambling because of this tax, we would actually be happy with that, even if it reduces revenue. Overall, we would probably get quite a lot of revenue in this proposal, which is a good thing. It's good for development, it's good for social expenditure. It might mean that there's less pressure on other taxes to go up. But our main aim here is to try and deter activities and reduce the amount of online gambling that's actually taking place.
So any kind of revenue received from this would go where?
So it would go straight into the National Revenue Fund and would be split in the budget the way that all other types of revenue get split. We're not proposing any type of earmarking of this. There have been previous proposals that we made in 2011, 2012, where we were trying to link it to some expenditure for responsible gambling. We will have to consider that. But at the moment, it would go into the general pot and it would go to education, health, services, police. It would add to all of those expenditures that we have. And as I said, it could then put less pressure on the other tax bases that we have. So maybe we won't need to increase personal income tax if we bring in a lot of revenue this way. So that's the way we're looking at it. It's an activity that we need to, as government, try and dissuade the public from doing. And a lot of this is also a signal to say that government is concerned about the excessive use of online gambling.
Christopher, I don't know if you've seen the front of the Business Day this morning thus far, because it's talking exactly about this. It says online gambling tax plan slammed as unworkable. We have it just on the front page there for our audience to see. And really it speaks specifically, it says that the South African Responsible Online Gambling Association, SAROGA, said that the consultation paper does not even attempt to quantify the social cost of problem gambling in the country, something the mooted tax seeks to actually solve. Are you able to do that by any chance? Are you able to quantify the social cost of problem gambling in the country?
Well, we can certainly try, and we haven't in that paper, so they are correct. We haven't put the social cost in there. The social cost, we think, is quite severe. There are lots of cases which are obviously only ad hoc, and it's not a full study, on problems of addiction, problems of mental health issues, financial distress. We get lots of people going towards, the Financial Sector Conduct Authority to say, we've lost everything from gambling. Can we get anything back? So we've seen these cases, and we can bring more of those out. I think part of this consultation is to say, let's get that evidence, let's get that evidence from different institutions, let's get the inputs from the public, inputs from the company. But of course, the industry is not going to want this tax. They're going to have headlines like that to try and say, let's not do it, because they won't want it. But that's why we have these consultations. We want to hear the inputs from everybody to say whether we should go ahead with this or not. We think it is something to do. That article also talks about administrative issues, but we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. This type of tax is in place globally. Many other countries have it. So it's certainly not administratively impossible. We will work through those issues to try and get it implemented in a smooth way, and we hope we can work with industry on that.
Yeah, and I suppose that it's why we're going to have why we're having this conversation, to try and find out how some of the modalities and the tough parts of this would actually work, perhaps. What about the impact this would have on the South African Revenue Service and the amount of work that they would need to do? Because this could ultimately push people into illegal forms of gambling too. There is that side of the equation. And would that not make it even more strenuous then on the Revenue Service?
So there are two aspects there. The one is that there is a provincial tax that is applied already. So these gambling operators, they already submit information to the provincial licensing authorities. They already pay a tax. The proposal in the paper is that we just go on top of that so that the administrative complications are as minimal as possible. Of course, there will be some issues that we will need to try and fix, but we can work on those. If the move to like illegal gambling, a lot of that could be from remote gambling. So gambling operators from outside South Africa. There we would actually try and rely on the banks through the authorized dealers who already at the moment should be blocking payments or payments from those operators because it is illegal. Similarly, we will also rely on the Financial Surveillance Department at the Reserve Bank to try and monitor these flows and block them if they need to. So it won't just be SARS, it'll be other institutions, and we'll have to have a whole of government approach to try and make sure that this will work and is implementable.
Yeah, that sounds like a major administrative nightmare across the board. And you spoke about parts of it being offshore. I mean, it's one of the questions that actually is asked here by Wayne Laurie, actually. And he says, how does SARS audit interactive gambling revenue from an operator whose servers or payment rails or wallet infrastructure might sit partly offshore? How would you then do that? Is that where you're saying the reliance on the lending institutions, the banks would have to be necessary, the revenue, the Reserve Bank coming into the fore here? Have you been able to speak to them already? And have they said that the infrastructure is in place to be able to do so?
Yeah, so we have had some informal discussions with them. On that point, if the operator is located domestically, even if they have a server offshore, the activity should be seen as happening in South Africa, and they are licensed by a provincial licensing authority. If they try and have activities which they are not disclaiming or providing to the provincial licensing authorities, that is fraud. So we would then go after them, and we would need to do that. So there are a lot of things here that we can fix and we can do, and that's why we're having this consultation period. So we're not proposing it, we're not implementing it next month. There's going to be a long time to talk about this to make sure that we can close all of those avenues. But I don't think it's going to be an administrative nightmare. I think this is something that can be done. A lot of countries do it, and we shouldn't be scared of doing it just because it might be difficult from an administrative point of view.
Yeah. How do you get to the figure of 20%? And would it indeed bring about 10 billion rand plus minus into the fiscus?
So the 20%, we've got a chart in the discussion paper where we looked at the rates in other countries. And a lot of those countries are at 20. Some of them are a little bit above. The provincial licensing authorities here already have rates between 6 and 9 around there. So the effective rate would actually be quite a bit more than 20. But we think that's a reasonable figure. This is also part of the consultation. We'll have to decide. But we want it to be high enough to actually try and show the public this is bad for you if you do it in an unconstructive way. If you are a problem gambler, you're struggling with addiction, we're trying to show you, don't do it. Look, this is that's why we tax alcohol. That's why we tax tobacco. If you are going to continue doing it, then we will get a lot of revenue, which can then help the state and help communities. So that's how we're approaching it. But, we'll have to look at it. Next thing, we do a socio-economic impact assessment. We look at those social costs, and maybe those social costs are even more, and the rate might need to be higher than 20%. So those are the things we're going to look at and try and investigate over the next few months.
Would it not have been better maybe to have looked at the amount of advertising and access that happens with regards to gambling? Could that not have been an easier curb?
So that doesn't quite fall in the terrain of the National Treasury. I suppose we are trying to use, the mechanisms that we have as the National Treasury to try and address this issue. We will work with other departments, the DTIC, the National Gambling Board, the provincial licensing authorities. We'll work with them to explore those other ideas. A lot of this is a provincial function. So the advertising, for example, is within the legislation, within the provincial legislators. So those are the discussions that we need to have. But I think you're right. This needs a whole of government approach to try and address this. And as a country, we need to decide how are we going to look at this, because the trajectory of online gambling has been incredible. It's been exponential. And is it really productive? Is it really useful for the country to have that level of online gambling, especially when there is so much poverty and unemployment that takes place right now?
Yeah, and I fully agree with that, and I fully understand that completely. One wonders on the other side of this conversation, though, that would this not be harmful to things like innovation in the gambling industry? Because it feels as though if we're likening it to a syntax, as you made note of, holistically, This then gets a bad rep, supposedly, and then some in the country would say, well, you're stifling business who's trying to actually grow the economy, who's trying to aid South Africa and make a business and make a living. And I suppose while you've made note of the ethical issues that you've made note of, it's that other side, that business side, that small business side, which might be growing too, that is of massive question here.
Yeah, I don't know. You've got to have a discussion there and think about what sort of value add is this creating? I mean, what product are we creating with all this money that's going into that could be exported to another country? What sort of additional skills are people getting from this activity? You know, maybe we should be having a conversation about how productive this industry is and how much does it add to the country. And I'm not sure that those benefits are there. So, you know, we need to be quite careful and we need to think about it. I don't think this tax will have a negative impact on entrepreneurs or on businesses. If all this money is going to gambling, but it could be going to other small businesses or tourism or, you know, other retailers, then it might be having more of an impact. So we've got to, I think, be a little bit careful about how we think about this industry and its contribution, you know, to society.
Yeah, look, Christopher, I can't appreciate enough your candor when it comes to this topic, especially as it is one that could get a lot of pushback that is here. And thank you for allowing me to also play devil's advocate on quite a few of the issues at play here. We'll see how things go. The white paper, of course, issued out. Christopher Axelson, Deputy Director General for Tax and Financial Sector Policy at the National Treasury.